The dust of the obsidian plains still choked the air, thick with the metallic tang of drying blood and the sharp scent of burnt ozone. Kalen Thorne, or simply Kale, a name now echoing with hollow defeat, felt the rough stone of the castle wall pressing against his exposed back. His silver-plated armor, once a beacon of the Sunlit Order, was now marred by jagged cuts. His shield, bearing the proud winged lion crest, lay uselessly cracked beside him. The battle for the last bastion of the Freelands was over. They had lost. A shadow fell over him, not the long, fading shadow of the setting sun, which was oddly twin-moon tonight, but a living, oppressive darkness. He slowly lifted his head, the movement a painful effort, and met the gaze of his captor. She was legend made manifest. Lysandra Vex, the Bloodwing General, the Emperor's chosen Warbride. She stood easily 7 feet tall, the massive feathered wings that sprouted from her back a deep oily black that drank the light. Her armor was obsidian dark, etched with swirling runes that glowed a furious violet. She was a vision of lethal elegance, the quintessential pure-blood vampire, her skin alabaster white against the crimson trim of her cloak, her eyes glowing with the chilling red light of a predator who had just finished its feast. In her hand she held a great sword, its blade slicked with something too dark to be oil, too rich to be water. A paladin of the Sunlit Order, her voice was a low, velvet rasp, devoid of emotion, like silk drawn over a whetstone. The last one who dared stand against the might of the Shadow Empire. I expected more fire. Kale coughed, the movement bringing fresh pain to his ribs. Fire fades when smothered by lies and darkness, General Vex. But embers remain. Lysandra only tilted her head, a gesture of cold curiosity. Her gaze lingered, not on his face but on the breastplate of his armor. She reached out a gauntlet finger, the movement surprisingly slow, and traced a barely visible etching near his neck, the seal of the Sunlit Order, a complex, ancient sigil that few outside the highest ranks even remembered. The embers will be extinguished shortly, she stated, her voice hardening. Lord Viridian Vex, my sire, demands a public spectacle. The final light of the old world must be quenched by the new. He has ordered your execution. By my hand. Kale closed his eyes briefly, accepting his fate. Death by the hand of the feared Warbride was a grim honor, perhaps a better end than slow torture. He braced himself, ready to utter one last prayer to the fading sun. Then do it, Kale challenged, meeting her red eyes without blinking. End it and let this pathetic resistance finally rest. A strange flicker crossed Lysandra's perfect, sculpted features, a micro-expression too fleeting to identify. It was not anger nor triumph, but something akin to calculation, or maybe a very old, very faint recognition. She lowered the tip of her sword but did not strike. No, she said, the single word hanging in the heavy air. Kale, expecting the blow, was thrown by the refusal. No. Your emperor commands it. Are you defying him? My emperor commands many things, Lysandra replied, turning her attention to the scattered, groaning survivors of Kale's company. But his wisdom is only as sharp as the tool he employs. You are a paladin of the Sunlit Order, yes, but you are also Kalen Thorne. She stepped closer, the heat radiating off her dark wings a physical weight. She leaned down, her breath cool and scentless, brushing his ear. The prophecy does not speak of a dead paladin, but a living one bound by the oath of blood. You are a tool and tools must be sharpened, not broken. She straightened up, her gaze sweeping over the handful of armored soldiers of the Shadow Empire who stood nearby, waiting for the command. He is a valuable prisoner. General Vex claims him for interrogation. Take him to the deepest cells beneath the citadel. Double the guards. If a single hair on his head is harmed by anyone other than me, I will personally flay you. The guards flinched, recognizing the deadly seriousness in her tone. They had expected an execution, a quick display of power. Instead, they got a sudden, terrifying change of orders. Kale was roughly pulled to his feet, his hands immediately bound in magically reinforced iron chains that sapped the residual light energy from his body. As he was dragged past Lysandra, he struggled to understand. Why had she spared him? Was it a crueler fate than death? His prison was a damp, lightless cavity beneath the Citadel of Dread, the very structure visible in the distance during the battle, a towering monument to eternal night. Days blurred into a heavy, agonizing stillness. The chains never left him. Then, on the third night, the door slid open, letting in a shaft of dim, violet light from the corridor. Lysandra Vex stood in the opening, flanked by 2 towering, silent vampire guards. She was no longer in her full battle armor, but wore a simpler, dark leather jerkin and trousers, though her sword remained strapped to her back. She dismissed the guards with a wave of her hand and stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind her. You were meant to die, Paladin, Lysandra began, walking slowly towards him. Her movements were fluid and silent, like water. It would have been simpler, cleaner. But simplicity is a luxury the Shadow Empire can no longer afford. And what luxury does the Empire afford in keeping its greatest enemy alive? Kale spat out, testing the tension in his chains. Lysandra paused a few feet away, her red eyes locking onto his. You were marked, Kalen. When I saw the runic seal of the Forgotten Sun on your armor, I knew my sire was attempting to destroy the key to his own cage. He has grown careless in his power. A prophecy? Kale scoffed, though the term sent a shiver down his spine. The Sunlit Order dealt in history and tangible power, not the superstitious nonsense of the Dark Realms. The prophecy of the Concord of the Two Moons, she corrected, her voice carrying a deep, ancient weight. It states that the final reign of shadow will only be broken when a paladin of the true sun is bound, not by chains, but by a ritual of blood and vows to a daughter of the first night. My sire intends to kill you to prevent this union. I intend to use it to destroy him. Kale stared at her, dumbfounded. You mean to use me to overthrow your own emperor? Your sire? My sire is a tyrant whose endless war bleeds this world dry, both the mortal realms and the shadows, Lysandra replied, her gaze distant, filled with an ancient weariness that belied her youthful appearance. I am bound to him by the oath of my bloodline, a curse, not a loyalty. The only ritual that can sever my obedience and break his magical hold over the empire is the oath of blood, a binding ceremony so extreme, so forbidden, that it requires the life force of a paladin and a pure blood. She then uttered the words that truly shattered his reality. The world must believe you are no longer an enemy but a possession. A prize. A husband. You must be elevated from prisoner to consort. The orders for your execution will be nullified by the marriage vows of the Shadow Empire. They will be false, a complete deception for the court, but the magic within them will be real. Tonight, Kalen Thorne, the last paladin, will marry Lysandra Vex, the Warbride. She stepped forward and knelt, her long fingers touching his bound hands. She wasn't holding a sword but a single ancient, obsidian ring. I was ordered to kill you. But to defeat the shadow I must first marry you. Do you submit to this treasonous vow, paladin? Your life and the fate of the free lands depends on this lie. The silence stretched, broken only by the drip of water from the stone ceiling. Kale looked at the fearsome warrior who was offering him a chance at impossible survival and devastating revenge. A chance wrapped in the terrifying ribbon of a forbidden, deceitful marriage. His mind screamed betrayal, but his heart, the heart of a warrior who refused to surrender, saw a glimmer of that ancient, fading light. I refuse to be a prize, Kalen finally said, his voice firm despite the weakness in his body. But if this vow can truly be used as a blade against your emperor, then I agree to your terms, General Vex. Let the lie begin. A predatory yet somehow relieved glint appeared in Lysandra's eyes. She stood up, tossing the obsidian ring onto his chest. Good. The ritual begins at dawn. And from that moment you will be known as my husband. Prepare yourself, Kalen. The real war is about to begin. She turned and left the cell, leaving him alone with the cold iron and the terrible, unbelievable realization that his life was now bound to the creature ordered to end it. The Warbride did not kill him. She married him. The transition from a prisoner facing execution to a supposed groom was jarring, a violent whiplash of fate. Kalen was not unchained, but his magically reinforced bonds were replaced with cuffs of polished silver, an ironic twist given his paladin oath. They didn't bind him as much as they symbolized ownership. He was scrubbed clean, the grime of battle replaced by foreign heavy silks of the Shadow Empire, deep maroon and black, a mockery of his sunlit orders white and gold. The marriage ritual was a grim, silent affair conducted in the obsidian throne room of the Citadel of Dread. Lord Viridian Vex, the Emperor, sat upon a throne that looked carved from solidified night. He was a creature of immense, chilling power, his eyes twin pools of burning amethyst. Lysandra stood before Kalen, her expression a mask of cold pride, entirely convincing the assembled court of high vampires, drow generals and Grolak mercenaries. The ceremony was a rapid exchange of arcane phrases in the ancient language of the night. It involved no kisses, no vows of affection, only a brutal, binding exchange of blood. Lysandra pressed a silver stiletto into her own palm, then pressed the bleeding wound against Kalen's lips. The moment the metallic, sweet blood touched his tongue, a violent, burning sensation exploded in his chest, right where the mark of the Sunlit Order rested. He felt a power, alien and dark, try to integrate with his own light, clashing like steel on stone. He held the pain in, refusing to give Viridian the satisfaction of seeing him break. By this oath of blood, the paladin, Kalen Thorne, is bound to the Warbride, Lysandra Vex, as her consort and property. Viridian's voice echoed, resonant and final. His life is now hers to command. Let the union be sealed. The moment the ritual was complete, Lysandra took Kalen's hand, a hard, professional grip, and led him away. He was now officially inside the belly of the beast. They were ushered into Lysandra's private wing, a sprawling maze of rooms overlooking the blasted landscape. It was opulent but sterile, lined with tapestries depicting ancient victories of the Shadow Empire. As soon as the heavy ornate doors hissed shut, Lysandra released his hand and spun to face him, the mask of the proud consort instantly dropping. "The pretense is over," she stated, walking to a massive window where the twin moons cast long violet shadows. "You are not my husband and you are not my prisoner. You are my necessary ally. Do not forget that." "Hard to forget, given the blood-tasting ceremony," Kale muttered, rubbing his chest where the arcane shock still lingered. "What exactly did that ritual do, Lysandra? I felt something trying to steal my soul." She finally faced him, her expression serious. "It didn't steal your soul, it intertwined your life force with mine. That is the true power of the Oath of Blood. While Viridian believes it is a master-slash-slave bond, in truth, it creates an unbreakable connection. If either of us dies, the other's existence is violently severed. This is why I needed you alive." Kale's eyes widened. "A suicide pact disguised as a wedding. Brilliant. So you can't kill me and I can't leave you to die." "Precisely. It is the only thing strong enough to shield you from my sire's decree. But the bond also has a side effect. It masks your paladin light, hiding you from Viridian's magic. You are now indistinguishable from any other consort in this court, a valuable possession, a trophy." A small, genuine smile, terrifying in its rarity, touched her lips. "Welcome to your new life, Consort Thorn." Over the next few weeks, the necessity of the lie became acutely painful. Kalen was forced into the rigid schedule of the Shadow Court. He had to attend banquets where blood was served in crystal goblets, and stand silently beside Lysandra as she issued military commands to generals who saw him as little more than a pet. The hardest part was the enforced intimacy of their quarters. They shared a single, sprawling suite. Lysandra insisted on maintaining the absolute facade for the servant guards who constantly monitored them. This meant holding hands, brief touches, and, most painfully for Kale, sharing the same bedchamber. "You will sleep there," Lysandra commanded on the first night, gesturing to a low velvet chaise lounge near the balcony. "The bed is mine. And remember, Kalen, in public your every gesture must scream devotion." In private she stepped closer, her red eyes intense, "It must scream nothing. I do not require affection. Only silence and obedience to our true goal." Their conversations were tense, whispered exchanges only when they were absolutely certain the magical warding of their chambers was active. They were planning a treason, a high-stakes conspiracy, all while pretending to be newlyweds. "Your strategy is flawed," Kale whispered one night, during a supposed private dinner, where they ate untouched human food while Lysandra sipped a thin red liquid. "You believe this bond will break Viridian's ancient power source, but what is it? A crystal? A scroll?" Lysandra pushed her plate away. "It is the blood heart of the Citadel. It is not a thing but a place deep beneath us, a pool of pure, concentrated shadow magic that he drains to maintain his immortality and control over his generals, including me. The prophecy states only a true son, you, bound to a first night me, can shine a void upon the heart." "Shine a void? That sounds like the kind of riddle meant to get us both killed." "All prophecies sound that way until they are solved," she countered sharply. "We must find the entrance to the blood heart. It is hidden within the castle's training grounds. Viridian uses the area to test his new recruits, distracting everyone from what lies beneath." Kalen saw a flicker of hope. Training. Something he understood. If we are to train together, it will look natural. A warbride teaching her human consort how to defend himself. It gives us an excuse to explore that area. Lysandra nodded, a hint of respect in her eyes. "Agreed. Tomorrow we begin your lessons, Consort Thorn. But be warned, the lessons will be brutal. You may be my key to freedom, but you are still a human and you are still pathetically slow." The very next day the training began. It was not a romantic, whispered exchange of secrets, but a vicious, exhausting affair. Lysandra moved with the impossible speed of a pure blood, her strikes precise and merciless. She used a darkened steel blade, while Kalen was given a heavy wooden training sword. She didn't teach him to fight like a paladin, she taught him to fight like a shadow, how to use the weight of his fear, the blindness of the dark, and the shock of unexpected movement. "You rely too much on the sun's strength," she snapped, driving him back with a swift kick that rattled his teeth. "In this realm the sun is dead. Use the shadows. Embrace the fact that you are small, slow, and soft. Make them forget what they are looking for." Kalen fell, his body screaming in protest. The irony was almost unbearable. The paladin, the champion of light, was being taught to use darkness by the most feared vampire in the Empire. Yet, in those brutal sessions something began to shift. The intense proximity, the shared goal, the necessity of relying entirely on each other to survive, slowly began to erode the fierce hatred he held for the enemy. One evening, after a particularly bruising session, Lysandra stood over him, her face inches from his, sweat glistening on her pale brow. "You have spirit, Kaelin," she admitted, her breath hot. "A warrior's spirit. It is the only reason you have survived this long. But you must learn to trust your bond. It is not just a shield, it is a shared strength." She lifted his chin with a cool finger, her red eyes probing his. "Remember this, you are the key to my freedom and I am the key to your revenge. We are allies bound by treason, nothing more. But we must sell this lie to the world or we both die." As she turned to walk away, Kaelin caught her wrist. "Lysandra, when we win, when Viridian is gone, what happens to the bond? To the marriage?" She looked back at him, her face inscrutable. "The bond remains. It is unbreakable. The marriage?" She gave him a look of cool dismissal. "That is the lie that simply ends. Now rest. We explore the crypt tonight." Kaelin watched her go, the obsidian ring on his finger suddenly feeling heavy, a chain of betrayal linking him forever to the vampire Warbride. The deception was complete. He was the enemy's consort, living under the nose of the tyrant, but the deeper they fell into the lie, the more terrifyingly real their bond felt. The crypt was a cold, silent museum of the dead, a labyrinth of forgotten ancestors of the Vex line. It was beneath the Citadel's notorious training grounds, a fitting disguise for the entrance to the Bloodheart. For 2 weeks, Lysandra and Kaelin spent the darkest hours of the night down there, ostensibly searching for ancient battle relics, but in truth, tracing the faint magical currents that Lysandra felt pulling toward the prophecy's destination. The tension between them was a taut wire, humming with unspoken conflict and reluctant respect. In the light of day, Kaelin played the role of the devoted, if somewhat overwhelmed, consort, always a step behind the formidable Warbride. In the shadow of the crypt, their roles were reversed. "Your paladin training," Lysandra whispered one night, the sound barely disturbing the dust, "it teaches you to strike at the physical weakness. Here you must strike at the magical weakness." Kaelin knelt, running his gloved fingers over an altar carved with forgotten runes. "And what weakness does the Shadow Empire have, besides its megalomaniacal leader?" "The source," she hissed, her red eyes narrowed on the altar. "Viridian's longevity isn't natural, even for a pureblood. He drains the life force from the Bloodheart. It is a font of pure darkness, but it relies on an absolute magical equilibrium. The prophecy says a sunlit object must be introduced at the moment of the void's opening." She looked at him, her gaze intense. "You are the sunlit object, Kaelin. Your light, contained by the oath of blood, is what will create the void. But we must find the entrance first." During these secret excursions, Kaelin began to understand Lysandra not as a monster, but as a prisoner defined by her chains. He noticed the minute tremor in her hand when she spoke of Lord Viridian, the sudden fierce look of pride when she successfully navigated a trap Viridian had laid centuries ago, confirming her deep knowledge of his mind. She wasn't merely treasonous, she was revolting against generations of forced servitude. Their bond, the forced intertwining of their life forces, was the true crucible. It began manifesting in strange ways. One afternoon, Kaelin was sparring against a particularly aggressive Grolak trainee. He was slow to block a massive, bone-crushing blow. Just as the axe handle swung down, a sudden, blinding speed surged through him. He moved like lightning, twisting out of the way and delivering a counterstrike with impossible precision. He was not just faster, he had moved with Lysandra's signature grace. Later, in their chambers, she found him panting, clutching his side. "What happened in the arena, Kaelin?" she demanded, her voice flat, but her eyes held a spark of surprise. "You moved like a Vex pureblood. It was reckless but effective." "I don't know," he confessed. "One moment I was going to be flattened, the next, it was like you took the wheel. I felt your speed, your instinct." Lysandra walked towards him, her brow furrowed. "The bond is deepening faster than I anticipated. The oath of blood is blurring the line between us. Our senses, perhaps even our physical attributes, are merging. When you felt that surge of speed, did you feel anything else?" Kaelin hesitated, the memory vivid. Along with the speed, he had felt a wave of icy, ancient loneliness and a blinding, searing anger, emotions that were too profound and too terrifying to be his own. "I felt rage," he finally admitted, "and a cold emptiness. It passed instantly, but it was powerful." "Was that your emotion?" Lysandra flinched, a rare, uncontrolled reaction. She turned away quickly, composing herself. "The bond is a two-way conduit, Paladin. Do not concern yourself with my history. It is irrelevant." "It's not irrelevant if it's flooding my mind," Kaelin argued, standing up and closing the distance between them. This was the most vulnerable he had ever seen her, and he pushed the boundary. "What did Viridian do to you, Lysandra? Why this desperate treason?" She stopped by the window, staring out at the twin moons. "You took everything. My true name. My life. My choice. He made me his Warbride to bind other vampire clans to him, not by love, but by fear of the power I wielded for him. He controls my very heartbeat through an ancient Vex Hayes. When we break the blood heart, his control over me dies with it. That is my true mission. He finally understood the depth of her sacrifice. Her freedom was conditional upon Viridian's destruction, a fact that overshadowed her survival. The true breakthrough came 3 days later in the crypt. They found a section of the wall that didn't look carved but melted into place. As Lysandra attempted to apply a dark counterspell, Kalen instinctively placed his hand on the wall and channeled the faintest residual light from his sunlit order seal. The wall didn't dissolve or blast open. It simply vanished, leaving a tunnel of smooth black glass leading downwards. It required both, Lysandra breathed, her voice filled with triumph. My shadow magic to initiate the phase shift, and your light to stabilize it. The prophecy is literal. The sun and the shadow must operate as one. The tunnel led them to a circular chamber. In the center, suspended over a glowing, swirling crimson pool, was an enormous, pulsating orb of black crystalline matter. It looked like a gigantic, inverted heart, pumping darkness into the very foundations of the citadel. This was the blood heart of the citadel. There it is, Lysandra whispered, her wings twitching with nervous energy. The source of his power. The chamber of the void's opening. But as they surveyed the chamber, Kalen noticed something else. On the opposite side of the chamber, carved into the stone, was an inscription. He knew the script. It was the ancient language of the First Sun, the foundational text of the Paladin Order. Lysandra, who only understood the language of the night, watched Kalen as he read the translation in his mind. The blood heart, forged in the first night, cannot be shattered by mere force. It is the vessel of the Vex Hayes and the key to the eternal reign. The only path to the void's opening is the true vow, a willing sacrifice of light to bind the shadow forever, and only then shall the blood heart yield its power to the heir of the union. Kalen's blood ran cold. He looked at Lysandra, who was eagerly waiting for his interpretation. The prophecy wasn't about simply destroying Viridian, it was about replacing him. And the oath of blood was not a fake marriage for protection. It was the true vow required to take control of the blood heart. Lysandra hadn't just saved his life, she had unknowingly made him part of a ritual to inherit the ultimate shadow power. The true treason was not against Viridian, but against his own light. What does it say, Kalen? Lysandra urged, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Kalen took a deep breath, the heavy knowledge of this ultimate betrayal settling in his soul. He had promised to lie for revenge, but this lie was bigger, darker, and final. He could not tell her the truth yet. If she knew the full stakes, the plan might fail. It confirms the timing, Kalen lied smoothly, channeling the very deception she had taught him. It says the blood heart is at its weakest during the convergence of the twin moons, which is 3 nights from now. We need to be ready. Lysandra nodded, satisfied. 3 nights. Then we end his reign. They left the chamber, but Kalen carried a terrifying secret back into the citadel. He wasn't Lysandra's consort. He was her unwitting pawn in a game for the control of the entire Shadow Empire. And their oath of blood, their fake marriage, was the absolute true vow that made them the co-heirs to the darkness. The sun and the shadow were no longer training partners. They were unknowingly bound co-conspirators against the entire moral order. The Citadel of Dread was a cage built of stone and shadow, and Kalen knew that even the thick layer of deception provided by the Oath of Blood was starting to crack. He had spent the last 3 days moving through the court with a forced smile and a terrifying secret. Their planned sabotage was actually an ascension ritual. He had to be careful. The deeper he and Lysandra were linked, the more their true emotions bled through the bond. He could feel her growing anxiety, and she, he suspected, was starting to sense his conflicted, buried terror. Their opportunity came on the night of the convergence of the twin moons, the night the blood heart was predicted to be at its weakest. The court was distracted by a massive, ritualistic banquet, a night of decadence designed to celebrate Viridian's immortal reign. Lysandra, in a stunning gown of black velvet that complemented her wings, stood beside Kalen at the Emperor's dais. She whispered instructions under the din of the music. The blood heart is directly beneath the throne room. We will wait for the final toast. That is when Viridian is most magically focused. As Lord Viridian Vex stood, raising a goblet of shimmering, crimson liquid, a sudden sharp pain flared in Kalen's chest. It was not the ambient magic of the bond, it was a physical intrusion, a freezing spike of fear that felt entirely Lysandra's. He knows. He knows everything. Get out. The thought was so loud and panicked in Kalen's mind that he nearly stumbled. Lysandra's mask remained perfect, but her hand, resting lightly on his arm, was shaking slightly. Viridian did not immediately drink. Instead, his amethyst eyes, normally cold and distant, focused with chilling intensity on his Warbride and her human consort. "My esteemed daughter, Lysandra," Viridian's voice boomed, carrying effortlessly over the crowd. "And my trophy consort Thorn. Tell me, my Warbride, is the oath of blood truly performing as intended? Is the paladin's spirit finally broken?" Lysandra met his gaze, her voice dripping with calculated arrogance. "The bond is absolute, sire. His light is quelled, his obedience unwavering. He is merely a tool now, useful for nothing but the occasional distraction." "A distraction," Viridian mused, his smile thin and cruel. "And yet, my daughter, your heart rate is elevated. And my personal sorcerer detected a rather curious surge of sunlit energy emanating from the crypts beneath the training grounds a few nights ago. Energy that coincides precisely with the ancient prophecy of the true vow." The smile vanished. "You did not merely marry him to silence the prophecy, Lysandra. You married him to fulfill it. You seek to bind the blood heart and steal my throne. Treason." The music stopped instantly. The entire court was paralyzed. Lysandra acted with the speed of a striking viper. She shoved Kaelin away from the dais, simultaneously drawing the long, curved dagger she kept hidden in her gown. "Now, Kaelin. The tunnel. Go." She launched herself at Viridian, her black wings exploding outwards, creating a cyclone of displaced air and shadows. The Emperor easily parried her desperate attack, his own power erupting in a blinding burst of purple energy that slammed Lysandra back against the obsidian wall. "You cannot defy the Hayas, my daughter. Your blood is mine." Viridian roared. Kaelin knew this was it. The thumbnail moment. He didn't hesitate. He dashed past the stunned vampire guards towards the hidden passage near the grand staircase, knowing Lysandra had bought him mere seconds. He felt a searing emotional agony through the bond. Lysandra was not just fighting for her life, she was wrestling with a magical compulsion, the Vex Hayas, that physically commanded her obedience to her sire. He reached the hidden panel reciting the arcane phrase. The wall shimmered open, revealing the tunnel to the crypt. But as he looked back, the guards were recovering. They were converging on Lysandra, who was barely holding her own against her father's magic and his personal assassins. He could not leave her. Kaelin drew the only weapon he had, the heavy, ceremonial longsword he wore as part of his court attire. It was not his blessed paladin sword, but it was steel. He charged back into the chaos, plunging the long blade into the armored chest of the first vampire guard to reach Lysandra. The blade shattered against the creature's dense magic, but the shock gave Lysandra the opening she needed. "Idiot. I told you to run," she shouted, though her voice was laced with a strange mixture of fury and relief. She grabbed him by the arm, her immense strength dragging him backward. "We go together. The bond, remember?" He gasped, his heart hammering. "Then move." They sprinted towards the opening tunnel, the entire court erupting behind them. Viridian, incandescent with rage, was already leveling a destructive spell. "You will not escape the Citadel of Dread." As Kaelin and Lysandra tumbled into the black glass tunnel, Viridian unleashed the spell, a torrent of pure shadow. Lysandra twisted, her large black wings spreading to shield Kaelin entirely. The spell hit her back with the force of a thunderbolt. A cry of pure agony ripped through the bond and straight into Kaelin's mind. He saw a flash of vivid, excruciating pain, the feathers of her wings smoking, the armor on her back melting. The shock was so immense that Kaelin felt his own strength drain away, the symbiotic relationship of the oath of blood momentarily turning fatal. They crashed out of the tunnel and into the crypt chamber. Lysandra was breathing hard, her wings twitching weakly. "They'll be through in minutes," she choked out, pushing herself up with difficulty. "We must reach the outer walls." They raced through the lower catacombs, the sound of armored boots echoing behind them. They emerged from a secondary passage, not into the training grounds but into the castle's armory. "Take a weapon," Kaelin, Lysandra commanded, pulling a wicked-looking sword from a rack. "Now you fight for real." Kaelin seized the nearest sword, a solid, balanced longsword, and grabbed a discarded shield bearing the crest of the Shadow Empire, a viper coiling around a skull. It was an insult to his former life, but he needed protection. They fought their way through the barracks and into the outer courtyard. The sun had long set, and the twin moons glowed blood-red in the smoky sky, exactly the scene on your thumbnail. The ruined battlefield stretched out before them, but the final high wall of the citadel remained. They stopped at the foot of the wall, their backs to the stones. A full company of Viridian's elite guard, armored in black and violet, blocked their path to freedom. "This is the end of your treason, Warbride," their captain sneered, raising his mace. Lysandra drew her newly acquired sword. She was injured, her wings barely functional, but her eyes burned with feral determination. Kaelin stepped forward, raising his stolen shield, aligning himself with the vampire general. They stood side by side, the paladin and the pure blood, the sun and the shadow, united not by love, but by the desperate oath of blood and a shared, final enemy. The vow is broken when one of you falls, Lysandra murmured, almost too low to hear. We fight as one, Kaelin. Or we die as one. Kaelin felt a rush of adrenaline, and with it, a strange sense of belonging he hadn't felt since his order fell. He looked at the woman who was ordered to kill him, but who now stood ready to die protecting their shared betrayal. He gripped his sword tighter. Let them come, Lysandra, Kaelin growled, the battle lust of the paladin finally overcoming the terror of the consort. I never liked formal dinners anyway. They charged into the thicket of black armor, the paladin's shield deflecting mace blows while the Warbride's sword danced in a lethal arc of shadow magic. They were two sides of a forbidden coin, and their combined fury was a spectacle of treason, carving a path towards the freedom of the desolate plains. They were running, but they were running together, their lives inexorably bound by the price of their desperate lie. The pursuit was relentless. Kaelin and Lysandra fought their way out of the citadel's walls and into the desolate, smoldering ruins of the plains. They had bought their freedom with steel and blood, but Lord Viridian Vex was not one to let treason go unpunished. His forces, led by his most loyal and ruthless general, Zarek, tracked them across the blackened earth. They spent the next day running, hiding in shadowed canyons, pushing their symbiotic oath of blood to its limits. The bond was now a constant, powerful presence. Kaelin felt Lysandra's pain from Viridian's blast, a deep, persistent ache in his own back, and Lysandra experienced Kaelin's crushing exhaustion, the desperate need for sunlight and rest that she, as a vampire, did not require. We cannot outrun him, Lysandra finally conceded, leaning against a jutting piece of rock, her breath ragged. Viridian has legions and the Vex Hayas is draining my will. It is a slow death for both of us. Then we stop running, Kaelin declared, wiping the grime and blood from his face. His stolen armor felt heavy, but the shield bearing the Shadow Empire's crest felt like a necessary defiance. We go back to the source. The Bloodheart is our only chance, Lysandra. The convergence of the twin moons is tonight. He then did something Lysandra didn't expect. He revealed the final, terrifying secret of the prophecy. I read the full inscription in the chamber, Kaelin confessed, meeting her red gaze with his own weary blue one. The true vow isn't meant to destroy the Bloodheart. It's meant to bind it. The prophecy says the power will yield to the heir of the Union. Our fake marriage is the key to inheriting Viridian's throne. Lysandra stood perfectly still, her eyes wide with shock. Her face, usually a mask of control, fractured. You knew this? And you kept it from me? I couldn't risk the plan failing. Kaelin argued, stepping forward. If you had known the stakes, the complete inversion of our goals, you might have hesitated. You wanted freedom, not power. I know your heart, Lysandra. I feel it now. You would have refused to become the next tyrant. But we don't have a choice. The prophecy is absolute. We seize the power to end the war, or Viridian kills us both and reigns forever. The betrayal hung thick between them, heavier than any chain. Lysandra's eyes narrowed, not with hatred for the lie, but with fear for the truth. If we bind the heart, it means we become what he is, she whispered, her voice laced with horror. We rule the Shadow Empire. You, a paladin, will become the consort of the night. No, Kaelin countered firmly. We won't become him. We use his source of power to break his chains, and then we use the strength of the oath of blood to forge something new. We will not rule the darkness, we will remake it. His conviction, fueled by the bond that linked their desperate wills, finally swayed her. Lysandra slowly extended her hand, not for battle, but for alliance. Then let us use this treacherous lie to forge a true future, Kaelin Thorne, she agreed, her voice resolute. We go back. Tonight. Their return to the Citadel was not quiet. They didn't sneak. They found a high point overlooking the plains and lit a signal flare, a deliberate provocation to draw Viridian's forces out and create a distraction. They were immediately met by General Zarek and a contingent of elite guards. The fight was brutal, fueled by the combined light and shadow energies that now coursed between Kaelin and Lysandra. Kaelin moved with vampire swiftness, dodging Zarek's heavy mace, while Lysandra used her fading light energy to temporarily blind a cohort of archers. The blurred lines of their powers made them unpredictable. During the melee, Kaelin noticed a faint, guiding light, a flash of white in the distance. It was Elder Soren, Kaelin's old mentor, leading a small, desperate band of the surviving Sunlit Order fighters. They had seen the signal. Lysandra, our allies are here. Kaelin shouted, parrying a deadly strike. A diversion. We split and find the weakest entry to the crypt. They fought their way through Zarek's line, Lysandra tearing a path with shadow magic, Kaelin hammering the center with the strength of his stolen shield. They plunged into a sewage grate leading beneath the castle, leaving the desperate fight raging above them. They raced through the foul-smelling tunnels until they reached the hidden entrance to the Bloodheart chamber. The moment they stepped into the black glass tunnel, the immense power of the blood heart pulsed around them, stronger than ever before. Lord Viridian Vex was waiting. He stood before the crimson pool, his entire body glowing with amethyst power, draining the blood heart to fuel his final defense. "You cannot surprise me again, Warbride," Viridian sneered. "The Hayas warned me. The moment you entered the crypt, I felt the treacherous bond strengthening. You will die here, both of you. And the paladin will be absorbed into the heart to fuel my eternal reign." "No, sire," Lysandra cried, leveling her sword. "Tonight the bond breaks your chain." The final confrontation began. It was not a conventional fight, but a battle of arcane will. Viridian directed torrents of raw shadow magic at them. Lysandra met him with her own dark power, but the Hayas fought her from within, causing her strength to falter. Kaelin knew this wasn't about swords. It was about the vow. "Lysandra. The true vow," Kaelin yelled. He dropped his sword and shield and rushed past Viridian's attacks towards the massive, inverted crystalline heart. "What are you doing, Paladin?" Viridian roared, unleashing a bolt of shadow aimed at Kaelin's back. Lysandra screamed and threw herself in the path of the bolt, shielding Kaelin again. The impact sent her staggering, but she remained upright, her will pushing back the Hayas. "You must reach the heart, Kaelin. I will hold him." Kaelin reached the base of the blood heart. He looked at his own hand, still wearing the obsidian ring, the sign of the oath of blood. He focused all his remaining light, all the truth of his paladin heart, and the chaotic, dark energy of his bond with Lysandra. "You are the light, I am the shadow. By the oath of blood, the vow is made true." He roared, slamming his hand onto the surface of the blood heart. A blinding, cataclysmic burst of energy erupted. It wasn't light or dark, it was a pure, neutral energy that forced the two extremes into perfect equilibrium. The true vow was fulfilled. The crystal heart didn't shatter, it went completely dormant. Viridian screamed, a sound of pure agony and impotence. The connection to his immortality, the source of his control, was instantly severed. The amethyst glow around him died, leaving him looking frail and ancient. "The power? It is yours now," Viridian rasped, defeated, staring at the inert heart. Lysandra, exhausted but free, turned and faced her sire. "No, father. It is no one's. The power is simply silent." Kaelin's body was shaking, but the terrifying power of the blood heart flowed into him, filtered through the true vow. He felt the urge to command, to dominate, to reign. The power of the Shadow Empire was his. But then he felt the counterforce, Lysandra's will, strong and true, channeled through the bond. Together they smothered the darkness. Lysandra walked up to Viridian, and for the first time she was truly free. She didn't kill him. She simply severed the final physical piece of the Hayas that still bound him to the citadel. "You are stripped of your power, Viridian. You will live as a mortal. The Shadow Empire is over." The war ended not with a human victory or a vampire defeat, but with a compromise. The two moons, now visible through the broken ceiling, shone down. Days later, the remnants of the Sunlit Order and the now liberated non-pure blood vampires stood together in the ruined plains. The Citadel of Dread was crumbling. Kaelin and Lysandra stood on a high ridge, side by side, still wearing their mixed armor, the human shield, the vampire sword. "The bond remains," Kaelin, Lysandra murmured, looking at the distant horizon where the first hint of true dawn was breaking. "The marriage remains." "Yes," Kaelin agreed, looking at the woman who had been ordered to kill him, but who now was his only anchor. "But the lie is over. We are bound by the truth now, Lysandra. The truth of what we broke and what we must now build." They had used a treacherous lie to gain power, but they had sacrificed that power for peace. They stood together, the paladin and the warbride, the symbols of the old conflict, now forged into the heirs of the dawn. Their oath of blood, the fake marriage, was now a true bond, the foundation of a dangerous, necessary new world. The silence that followed the defeat of Lord Viridian Vex was louder than any war cry. The blood heart pulsed, no longer with malign power, but with a quiet, inert stability. The threat was gone, but the immense, crushing responsibility had just begun. Kaelin Thorne and Lysandra Vex stood in the empty chamber, still covered in grime and blood. The oath of blood now felt less like a chain of betrayal and more like the very anchor of their beings. Their shared victory was palpable, a current of relief and exhaustion flowing between them. "We did it," Kaelin whispered, the words tasting like dust and triumph. "The Hayas is broken. You are free, Lysandra." Lysandra looked down at her hands, flexing her fingers, testing the freedom. The intense internal pressure that had governed her every heartbeat for centuries was finally gone. Her wings, though damaged by Viridian's blast, were hers alone. "Freedom is heavy, Kaelin," she replied, her voice low. "Viridian is defeated, but the Shadow Empire is still standing. We didn't destroy it, we just decapitated it. The court, the armies, the liberated slaves, They all need direction. They need a ruler. They have one, Kaelin said, meeting her eyes. The heir of the Union. You are the true Warbride, Lysandra. The other purebloods will yield to you. And what about you, Paladin? She challenged. You bound the Bloodheart. The strength of the Sunlit Order is necessary for the stability. You are the consort of the night, Kaelin. Your place is beside me, or this new reign will fail before it begins. Kaelin felt the deep conflict of that truth. He was the champion of light, now bound to the ultimate source of shadow. But the needs of the broken world outweighed his oath. The war had to end. Then we will rule together, Kaelin agreed, placing his hand over hers. Not as tyrants but as a bridge. We are the dawn, Lysandra. They ascended from the crypts, their appearance in the devastated courtyard silencing the skirmish between Elder Soren's ragged human remnants and the remnants of Viridian's forces. Elder Soren, Kaelin's wizened mentor, rushed forward, his face etched with concern, then disbelief. Kaelin, you live. But, beside the Warbride? What dark magic is this? The dark magic that ended the war, Soren, Kaelin stated, his voice ringing with authority he hadn't known he possessed. He stood beside Lysandra, a united front. Lord Viridian Vex is defeated. The Bloodheart is silenced. Lysandra and I are now the rulers of the Shadow Empire, dedicated to establishing peace. A roar of outrage erupted, not from the humans, but from the ranks of the surviving vampires. General Zarek, a brute of a general loyal only to the idea of pureblood domination, pushed his way to the front. Treason. The Warbride is a traitor and bound by a false vow. Zarek snarled, leveling his mace at Lysandra. And the Paladin is a slave and a pawn. We will not bow to a broken oath and a human consort. The oath is not broken, Zarek, Lysandra commanded, her voice suddenly amplifying, infused with the subtle resonant power of the silent Bloodheart. It is fulfilled. The oath of blood is the true vow. I am the first daughter, and my rule is sanctioned by the ancient law of the Vex line. Yield or die. Zarek hesitated, recognizing the depth of power in her voice, but his hatred for the human standing beside her was stronger. He raised his mace. Never. Kaelin moved first. He didn't use the stolen sword. He used the subtle, dark speed the bond had gifted him. He slammed his shield into Zarek's chest, throwing the heavy vampire general off balance. Lysandra followed instantly, her blade carving a precise, non-fatal wound across Zarek's arm. A clear demonstration of dominance, not bloodlust. He does not die today, Lysandra announced, stepping over the groaning general. But he will serve. The Shadow Empire will learn discipline. General Zarek, you are bound to my service. Resist, and the next blow will be mortal. The display was enough. The other generals, terrified of Lysandra's ruthless competence and the strange power of the paladin who fought like a shadow, knelt one by one. The Shadow Empire had a new leader, and her power was terrifyingly absolute. But the real struggle was with Elder Soren. Kaelin, Soren whispered, pulling him aside while Lysandra dealt with the kneeling generals. Your oath to the Sunlit Order. You swore to destroy the darkness, not to rule it. This bond, this true vow, what exactly did you do in that chamber? Is your soul compromised? My soul is intact, Soren, Kaelin assured him, though the doubt was a heavy weight. I bound the Bloodheart, I didn't drain it. It is inert. The war is over. If I had destroyed Lysandra's chance at freedom, Viridian would have won. We ended his tyranny without shedding further blood. Isn't that the highest paladin virtue, peace? Soren looked at Lysandra, the beautiful, terrifying queen of the shadows, who was now issuing orders for the humane treatment of the liberated slaves. He saw the genuine change, but he also saw the obsidian ring on Kaelin's finger, the symbol of his final, forbidden allegiance. Peace bought with the chains of the enemy is still peace, Kaelin, Soren said, his voice heavy with ancient wisdom. But the light will never trust the shadow. You have chosen a lonely path. The Sunlit Order will not follow you into this citadel. We will retreat and watch. Prove that the heirs of the dawn are not just a darker tyranny. It was a final, painful severing. Kaelin was no longer a paladin of the Sunlit Order. He was the consort to the Vampire Queen, a bridge between two broken worlds. He watched Soren and the last of his people march away, their hope tinged with deep suspicion. Lysandra joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. They do not trust the lie that became our truth. No, Kaelin replied, turning to face the ruined citadel. But they will. We have to prove that our bond is not just about survival but about rebuilding. We start now, Lysandra. The court must be purged, the laws rewritten, and the war machine dismantled. Their first night as rulers of the former Shadow Empire was spent not in a lavish chamber, but in a small, secure office, poring over ancient texts and writing decrees. Their relationship, born of deception and survival, was shifting again, from reluctant allies to equal partners in a monumental task. The terrifying secret of the true vow was now their shared burden, their joint mandate to forge the dawn from the darkest ashes. The real challenge was not defeating Viridian, but governing the peace that followed. The Bloodheart was silent, but the court of high vampires, drow nobles and newly bound generals like Zarek, waited, watching for a single mistake to break the fragile oath of blood and reclaim the shadow for themselves. Their marriage was real in magic, but it had to be made real in governance, or their fragile reign would collapse. The new day brought a wave of silent, insidious resistance. The high vampires who made up the former Shadow Court were creatures of tradition and immense, ancient pride. They had bowed to Lysandra Vex because she was a pure-blood, powerful, and sanctioned by the Oath of Blood. But they scorned Kaelin Thorn, the human paladin who stood beside her, his very presence an insult to their millennia of superiority. The first full meeting of the newly constituted council was held not in the grand, intimidating throne room, but in a smaller, warded council chamber. A sign that Lysandra was operating with careful pragmatism, not bombast. Lord Valthus, the oldest and most influential of the court, a vampire whose history predated the citadel itself, led the opposition. He was all silken voice and veiled contempt. "My queen," Valthus began, inclining his head barely an inch. "We accept the ascension of the Warbride as decreed by the ritual. However, the position of consort is merely ceremonial. Matters of state, particularly the management of the drow legions and the allocation of vital resources, must be decided by the council. The paladin, Consort Thorn, lacks the requisite experience, the blood for such decisions." Kaelin felt the familiar sharp spike of anger, but it was Lysandra who spoke first, her voice a chill whip-crack in the chamber. "The true vow binds my rule and my consort's rule together," Lord Valthus, Lysandra stated, her red eyes locking onto the ancient vampire. "His authority is not ceremonial, it is absolute, equal to my own. He is the heir of the Union. Furthermore, he holds the only key to the Bloodheart. Without his influence, the heart remains silent, and the source of our strength remains dormant. Anyone who questions his command questions mine." Valthus merely smiled, a slow, condescending curve of his lips. "A threat, my queen? A fascinating demonstration of loyalty to a pet. But the laws of succession are clear. The consort has no right to alter the fundamental laws of the Empire. We demand the immediate restoration of the human subjugation protocols and the continuation of the resource wars." The core of the conflict was clear. The court wanted Kaelin removed and the war restarted. Kaelin knew he had to act, not just as Lysandra's shield, but as her political equal. He stepped forward, his body radiating the latent, subdued light energy that Lysandra's bond now filtered and amplified. "The war is over," Kaelin announced, his voice steady, channeling the unexpected calmness that flowed from Lysandra through the bond. "The new rule is founded on strategic peace. Lord Valthus, you speak of resources. Where did those resources go? They were bled dry by a millennia of pointless aggression under Viridian. We will rebuild the economy through cooperation, not conquest." He looked directly at General Zarek, who stood brooding at the corner, his arm still bandaged from Lysandra's strike. "General Zarek will be tasked with dismantling the outer garrisons and repurposing them as trade ports. His legions will become builders, not destroyers. This is not a request, General, it is a direct command from the heirs of the dawn." Zarek's face twisted in silent fury, but he gave a grudging, shallow bow. The display of absolute authority was startling to the court. Kaelin, the human, was giving orders to the most brutal vampire general, and Lysandra did nothing to contradict him. Later that night, Lysandra found Kaelin alone, poring over maps of the dilapidated drow mining territories. She had been observing him from the doorway, her immense black wings folded neatly against the wall. "You handled Valthus with surprising competence, Kaelin," she admitted, walking in. "You pushed him precisely where he was weakest, the economy. But you gave Zarek a task that will feel like an insult. He will seek to undermine you." "I know," Kaelin replied, not looking up. "I gave him an insult I can measure. He will either fail publicly, giving us the right to execute him without internal backlash, or he will succeed and we will actually get trade ports. Either way we win." Lysandra stood beside him, her presence warm despite the natural coolness of her skin. She reached out and traced the lines on the map. "The most dangerous resistance is often hidden in the quiet hours," she murmured. "I felt your frustration in the council chamber, Paladin. That urge to strike him down, to end the argument with force. I felt yours too," Kaelin countered, meeting her gaze. "The desire to use the full power of the Bloodheart to crush his will, to make him kneel instantly. We hold each other back, Lysandra. Your darkness tempers my idealism and my light contains your ruthlessness." She nodded, a serious, solemn acknowledgement. Their relationship was now defined by this constant, involuntary emotional mirroring. They were two halves of a governing whole, their contrasting powers perfectly balanced by the oath of blood. We must maintain the lie of the marriage, Lysandra stated, her voice returning to its pragmatic tone. Not for the court's benefit but for our own. The high vampires respect only power and absolute possession. Our unity must be flawless. She then did something she rarely did outside of enforced court appearances. She took his hand. It was a gesture of political necessity, but the contact sent a familiar low hum of energy through their bond, a silent reminder that they were linked by something far deeper than mere political convenience. We need a public display, Lysandra continued, her red eyes focused on the political requirement, not the personal intimacy. A state visit to the captured human territories. A demonstration that the paladin consort is not a prisoner but a bridge, and that the Warbride is now a queen of peace. Kalen looked at the hand that had tried to execute him, the hand that now offered him partnership and a future. He squeezed it once, firmly. The human territories will not welcome you, Lysandra, Kalen warned her. They know you as the Warbride, the butcher of the free lands. The suspicion from Soren's people will be the least of our problems. Then we will face it together, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. They must see that the sun and the shadow are no longer at war. That is the only way this fragile dawn will survive. The challenge was not over. The greatest threat to their new reign was not an army on the outside, but the ancient hatred simmering within the citadel, a hatred that could shatter the fragile bond of the true vow if either Kalen's light or Lysandra's shadow dominated their shared rule. They had overthrown a tyrant, but they now had to manage the tyranny of the past. The journey to the former free lands, now grimly known as the border territories, was fraught with political peril. Lysandra Vex rode a magnificent, armored shadow steed, her black wings catching the weak, twin-mooned light. She wore her full general's armor, not to intimidate but to communicate strength. Kalen Thorn rode beside her, clad in his tarnished paladin armor, the viper-crested shadow shield strapped to his saddle, a deliberate mix of the past and the necessity of the present. They were met at the outskirts of the territory by Lady Elara, the pragmatic human general who had served as Kalen's second-in-command before the fall. Elara's face was a study in cold hostility. She had rallied the scattered remnants of the human resistance, and she was in no mood for pleasantries. Warbride, Elara spat, ignoring the respectful title, you bring us peace and a new chain. And you, Kalen, she looked at him with profound disappointment, you bring her here as her pet. Is this what the Sunlit Order fought for? We bring an end to the war, Elara, Kalen responded, dismounting and walking toward her, his posture that of a negotiator, not a warrior. Lord Viridian is gone. The Bloodheart is silent. Lysandra is Queen of the Shadow, and she offers unconditional peace and autonomy to the territories. Peace offered by the hand that murdered our people is not peace, it is a treaty of surrender, Elara countered fiercely. You stand beside the creature who slaughtered half my legion, Kalen. How can you expect us to trust a union born of blood magic? Lysandra finally dismounted, her imposing height forcing Elara to look up. General Elara, I do not expect your trust. I expect your pragmatism. I am a pure blood and I am the most powerful force in these lands. I could continue this war and grind your people into the dirt. Instead, I offer my protection against the internal enemies who will rise up now that Viridian is gone. We seek to dismantle the Citadel's war machine. That is all Kalen and I ask for, a chance to prove that the heirs of the dawn are different. The conversation was not yielding. The emotional barrier of centuries of war was too thick. During the tense exchange, an arrow, sharp and silent, flew from the woods and struck Lysandra's shoulder. It wasn't silver, but a plain human arrow, likely fired by a distraught survivor seeking revenge. The effect was instantaneous and violent. Lysandra barely flinched, the arrow piercing her thick armor and pale flesh. But Kalen staggered as if he had been struck himself. The oath of blood instantly transmitted a searing jolt of pain, a shock that momentarily clouded his vision and buckled his knees. Elara and her human guards immediately drew their swords, thinking Kalen's reaction was a signal for attack. The few remaining vampire guards tensed, ready to defend their queen. Stop. Kalen roared, even as he fought to suppress the transmitted agony in his shoulder. He saw the genuine raw fury that flared in Lysandra's eyes, a reflex of pure, ancient vengeance. He reached out and grasped the hand she was raising, the hand that was about to unleash a devastating torrent of shadow magic on the nearby woods. No, Lysandra. Control, Kalen urged, his voice tight with shared pain. This is what they expect. Do not give them reason. Lysandra stood frozen, wrestling with the pain and the furious, instinctual urge to destroy. Her crimson eyes locked onto Kalen's, and she saw the mirror of her own suffering reflected there. She slowly lowered her hand, her breath hissing out in a long, controlled exhalation. Elara, witnessing the paladin absorb the vampire's pain and the Warbride suppress her killing instinct at his command, was momentarily stunned. She had seen the bond described in reports, but to witness its depth and Kalen's unique influence was unnerving. "Retrieve the assassin," Lysandra commanded, her voice steady despite the blood welling around the arrow shaft. "Bring them before me, unharmed." The guards returned quickly, dragging a frightened, middle-aged woman, a farmer's wife whose family had been killed by the Warbride's legions years ago. The entire human contingent waited for the brutal, expected execution. Lysandra walked up to the woman, ignoring the arrow lodged in her armor. She looked down at the assassin, not with hatred but with a strange, cold pity. "You sought justice for your dead," Lysandra stated. "I understand that rage. But your arrow struck only me. If you had succeeded, the war would have begun again and all your people would pay the price." She looked at the assembly, then back at the woman. "Justice is not vengeance." "Kalen," she looked to her consort. Kalen walked forward, his presence providing a stabilizing, impartial weight. "The new rule is based on the law, not blood feud. You have broken the fragile truce. You will be imprisoned for 1 year, but your life will be spared. The resources you need to rebuild your farm will be provided by the Citadel." Lysandra then performed the final, shocking act of defiance against her own nature. She reached up and, with a grimace, snapped the arrow shaft, then pulled the head free from her shoulder. The wound sealed instantly, her pure blood physiology healing the damage, but the action sent another debilitating wave of pain through Kalen. "This wound is the price of peace," Lysandra announced to the shocked crowd, holding up the bloody arrow. "We have paid for it in the past and we will pay for it now. General Alara, take the prisoner. I require a full accounting of your territorial needs. We begin rebuilding tomorrow. Kalen and I will remain here for the duration." The display was a political masterstroke. She had shown strength, mercy, and, most importantly, the profound, stabilizing influence of Kalen Thorne. Alara, still deeply suspicious, could not argue with the actions. The Warbride had been shot and had offered peace and justice, not retribution. That night, alone in their guarded quarters, Kalen finally confronted Lysandra about the shared pain. "That was calculated madness, Lysandra," Kalen said, rubbing his aching shoulder. "You ripped that out just to make a statement. I felt every shred of it." "I needed them to see it," Lysandra admitted, leaning her head against the cold stone wall. She was exhausted, the emotional exertion of suppressing her instinctual rage more draining than any wound. "I needed them to see that your pain is my pain. That the bond is real. It is the only way to earn the fear of the shadow and the reluctant respect of the light." She looked at him, her red eyes softer than he had ever seen them. "You are the only part of this entire reign, Kalen, that is not a lie. The sun and the shadow are one whether we wished it or not. We need to remember that when the real plots begin." The external opposition had been temporarily neutralized by their shared sacrifice. But Kalen knew that their time in the human territories had also been a time of opportunity for their internal enemies, particularly General Zarek and Lord Valthus, to conspire in the dark heart of the Citadel. The war for the soul of the new empire was far from over. The Citadel of Dread felt different upon their return. The grim, oppressive atmosphere that had defined Lord Viridian Vex's reign was replaced by a simmering, insidious tension. The shadows were colder, the silence deeper. It was the silence of a conspiracy, the stillness before a coup. "They are waiting," Lysandra Vex murmured, her voice tight as they swept through the grand hall. She was radiating an aura of absolute command, compensating for the unease she felt, which Kalen felt doubled through the oath of blood. "They are testing the borders of our authority," Kalen Thorne agreed. He felt a creeping doubt through the bond, a corrosive emotion that wasn't his own inherent conflict, but a specific, cold poison targeting Lysandra's legitimacy. "This is Valthus," Kalen realized. "He is trying to break her will." They immediately summoned General Zarek for a progress report on the trade ports, the insult Kalen had issued in the guise of a command. Zarek stood before them, his posture a study in barely contained insolence. "My queen, Consort Thorne. The project is a failure. The local tribes lack the discipline for construction, and the territory is too hostile. My legions are warriors, not builders. It proves that the human territories are only useful when subjugated. And the drow resources we allocated?" Lysandra pressed, her voice sharp. "Stolen," Zarek stated simply. "A regrettable loss to local brigands." Kalen intercepted the lie not through reason but through the bond. Lysandra felt a spike of triumph and contempt from Zarek that did not match his feigned regret. Kalen recognized the internal contradiction. Zarek hadn't failed. He had deliberately sabotaged the effort and blamed the outcome on the humans to justify his demand for renewed conquest. "The resources were not stolen, General," Kalen corrected, stepping forward. His voice was calm, a direct challenge to the general's lie. "They were diverted. Your ledgers show a transfer to Lord Valthus's personal vaults. We gave you an opportunity for peace, General. You chose treason. Zarek paled, shocked that Kalen, the human, had seen through his complex deception so quickly. The bond allowed Kalen to track the emotional intent of the lie, not just the logical flaw. Lysandra, now armed with Kalen's certainty, unleashed a bolt of focused dark energy that slammed Zarek against the wall, but stopped short of killing him. "You will be imprisoned," Lysandra commanded, her voice vibrating with cold fury. "Your rank is stripped. If Lord Valthus is implicated in this, his fate will be sealed." This public demonstration secured Zarek's downfall, but it merely brought the true orchestrator, Lord Valthus, out of the shadows. Valthus appeared hours later, flanked by a council of ancient, highly respected purebloods. He did not deny the treasury transfer. He merely provided a chillingly logical justification. The general's actions, while regrettable, were driven by the instability of the crown, Valthus stated, his voice smooth and legally precise. "My queen, the true weakness lies not in our army, but in your adherence to the true vow. We have consulted the ancient texts of the First Night. The oath of blood is only unbreakable if the consort is an equal source of magical power." He fixed his gaze on Kalen, his contempt finally undisguised. "Consort Thorn is a paladin, a warrior. He is deficient in pure blood arcana. The ancient law dictates that a high-ranking pureblood may challenge the consort to a duel of magical prowess. If the consort is proven inadequate, the oath of blood is deemed nullified, the bond is severed, and the queen must choose a more suitable mate." The court murmured in agreement. It was the perfect trap. They weren't challenging Lysandra's legitimacy. They were challenging the legitimacy of her bond, the very foundation of her reign. They were leveraging the paladin's inherent weakness, his lack of raw, inherited shadow magic. "I accept the challenge," Kalen stated before Lysandra could object. He knew refusal meant instantaneous loss of power and credibility. "No, Kalen, you cannot," Lysandra hissed later that night in their private quarters. "Valthus is one of the oldest practitioners of Vex blood magic. He will flay your soul before you can raise your shield. This is what they want the bond broken." "And you know, Lysandra, that running will only confirm their claims," Kalen argued, his mind racing, fueled by desperation. "We have to fight. But we won't fight on his terms. He expects a duel of raw power. We will give him a duel of truth." He walked over to the largest mirror in the room, focusing on his reflection, which was now subtly overlaid by a faint, dark ripple, a side effect of the constant bond. "You taught me to use shadow and I taught you to contain rage. We will use the true vow itself as the weapon," Kalen declared. "Lysandra, tell me everything you know about the structure of the Bloodheart. I need to learn how to channel its silence." Over the next 24 hours, their chambers became a desperate academy of arcane countermagic. Lysandra, the master of shadow, taught Kalen, the master of light, how to feel the deep, inert power of the silent Bloodheart through their bond. She taught him how to draw on its neutrality, a power that was neither light nor dark, but pure equilibrium. "It is not magic, Kalen, it is anti-magic," she explained, tracing runes on his palm. "Valthus will attack your light. You must counter with the void's silence, the absence of both light and shadow that our bond created. If you can channel that absence, his power will simply dissolve." Kalen trained relentlessly, the effort draining him far more than any physical battle. He felt the cold, vast emptiness of the silent Bloodheart through the bond, a dizzying, terrifying well of potential power. "If I fail, Lysandra," Kalen whispered, exhausted, "the bond breaks. You will be free of the vow. You must kill Valthus and rule alone." Lysandra looked at him, her red eyes burning with fierce refusal. "The bond is not a chain I wish to discard, Paladin. It is the only thing that proves this dawn is real. If you fall, I will not rule. I will burn the citadel to the ground. You will not fail." The time for the duel arrived. It was set in the grand courtyard, the ground still scarred from the final battle. The entire court, including the newly freed drow and human prisoners who had stayed, gathered to witness the fate of the heirs of the dawn. Lord Valthus stood opposite Kalen, clad in ceremonial armor, his hands already crackling with dark, ancient power. Kalen wore only his black consort silks, standing barehanded, his only visible connection to power being the obsidian ring on his finger. Valthus smiled, a confident, deadly sneer. "The paladin comes to his end naked and unarmed. My queen, watch closely as I sever this pathetic chain." Kalen met his gaze, the vast, chilling silence of the Bloodheart thrumming in his soul, filtered and contained by Lysandra's constant presence through the oath of blood. The duel for their survival and for the future of the new empire was about to begin. Kalen knew he was about to risk his life on the most terrifying lie of all, that a paladin bound to a vampire queen could wield the power of silence. The courtyard was hushed, the only sound the rustle of Lysandra Vex's wings as she watched from the temporary dais. The entire shadow court, a sea of calculating faces, fixed their attention on Kalen Thorn, the human paladin who stood unarmed before Lord Valthus, the master of ancient blood magic. Valthus wasted no time on ceremony. He raised his hands and the very air around him darkened, coalescing into twin spheres of pulsating violet power. You were a fool to accept, Paladin. Your light is a candle, my shadow is the infinite night. Vex Arcana, drain of the sun. The violet spheres shot toward Kalen, designed to not just strike, but to violently extract and extinguish his inherent sunlit energy, thereby breaking the oath of blood. Kalen braced himself not to defend but to channel. He reached deep within, not for the light he was sworn to, but for the profound absence he had bonded with, the inert, stable neutrality of the silent blood heart. He focused on the chilling emptiness, drawing its void silence through the true vow that linked him to Lysandra. As the twin spheres of dark power neared him, Kalen unleashed the silence. It wasn't a blast but an instantaneous consumption. The violet magic hit a field of pure nothingness and simply vanished, like water poured into dry sand. The air, which had been charged with Viridian's ancient shadow magic, suddenly felt clean, empty. The court gasped. Valthus's eyes widened in genuine terror. He had expected resistance, a desperate shield of light, but he had encountered a power he didn't recognize, a power that nullified his own. Impossible. Valthus shrieked, his composure shattered. What sorcery is this? You wield neither light nor shadow. I wield equilibrium, Valthus, Kalen stated, his voice resonating with an authority that surpassed his mortal frame. He felt Lysandra's fierce pride and focus flow through the bond, stabilizing the dizzying energy he was channeling. The oath of blood has given me access to the blood heart's silence. Your magic, born of imbalance and conflict, cannot survive the truth of peace. Valthus threw spell after desperate spell, shadow bolts, blood curses and binding runes. Each one slammed into the field of silence. Kalen projected and vanished without a trace, leaving Valthus exhausted and terrified. The ancient vampire knew he was losing not just the duel but his life. In a final desperate act, Valthus turned his magical focus toward the dais where Lysandra stood. If I cannot break the consort, I will sever the queen. Severing hex of the first night. This spell was aimed not at Lysandra's body, but at the oath of blood itself, intended to rip the true vow from her life force. Kalen moved instantly. This time he didn't rely on the void silence alone. He used the lightning speed and dark instinct gifted by the bond, blurring across the courtyard to place himself directly in front of Lysandra. The hex hit him square in the chest. The pain was unlike anything he had felt, a grinding, tearing force attempting to pull his soul away from the stabilizing anchor of the bond. He screamed, the agony echoing through the oath of blood, slamming into Lysandra's mind like a physical blow. Lysandra staggered, clutching her head, but she did not fall. She saw Kalen's sacrifice, the total faith he placed in their bond. Her immense will surged through the connection, reinforcing his shattered defense. The vow is unbreakable. Lysandra roared, unleashing her own channeled power, not destructive shadow but a wave of pure, concentrated Vex authority. The combined force of their will, Kalen's defiant silence and Lysandra's commanding authority, hit Valthus, who was already depleted. The ancient vampire collapsed, not dead, but completely stripped of his magical capability, reduced to a trembling mortal state. Kalen sank to his knees, his body shaking, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He was protected but the cost had been staggering. Lysandra rushed to him, kneeling instantly, her hands cupping his face. Kalen, you fool. You risked everything. Her eyes, usually cold crimson, were now blazing with a raw, fierce emotion that transcended political necessity. It was unadulterated relief and fear for his life. We won, Lysandra, Kalen whispered, feeling the strength of her touch flow through the bond, knitting his fractured energy back together. She stood up, holding her consort, still radiating the power that had just defeated the court's strongest conspirator. She looked at the terrified assemblage of purebloods. Lord Valthus is stripped of all power and rank, Lysandra commanded, her voice ringing with finality. He will be exiled never to return. Let this be a testament to the fact that the true vow is not a chain of weakness, but an unbreakable dominion. The heirs of the dawn rule by absolute authority. Question it again and you will share his fate. The court, witnessing the utter humiliation of Valthus and the terrifying resilience of the oath of blood, finally and completely yielded. General Zarek, watching from his makeshift prison window, saw his last hope of overturning the reign crumble. The internal threat was neutralized. Lysandra and Kalen walked back into the citadel, their alliance sealed by the greatest test of their bond. Kalen was no longer the skeptical paladin consort. He was the wielder of the void's silence, the source of the new empire's stability. And Lysandra was no longer just the Warbride. She was the queen of authority, fiercely protective of the human who anchored her reign. The external threats were waiting, the human resistance still distrustful, but their internal control was absolute. Their forbidden marriage was no longer a lie told to survive. It was the core truth of the fragile new world. They had won the war for the Citadel, but the greater battle, the one for the soul of the Empire, was just beginning. The defeat of Lord Val thus brought silence to the Shadow Court, but the world outside the Citadel screamed with need. The true magnitude of Viridian Vex's tyranny was revealed not in battle scars, but in the devastation of the land. Entire forests were choked by shadow blight, rivers ran thin and polluted, and the infrastructure of the former free lands was non-existent. Lysandra Vex, the Warbride turned queen, was used to waging war with speed and decisive force. Peace, she discovered, was a slow, frustrating grind. She had set General Zarek, now under strict magical control, and his legions to work rebuilding the shattered roads and fortifying the border against rogue Grolak raiders. Yet, Kaelin's input was constantly needed. "This is inefficient," Lysandra declared one afternoon, hovering over a map of the devastated agricultural belt. Her frustration was palpable, a sharp, cold spike of annoyance that momentarily clouded Kaelin's focus through the oath of blood. "My legions can move a mountain in a week. They are rebuilding a single granary in a month. Why this sluggish pace?" Kaelin Thorne, seated across the massive obsidian table, rubbed the bridge of his nose. He had barely slept, his days consumed by logistical nightmares and diplomatic communication with the increasingly cautious border territories. "Your legions are vampires," Lysandra, Kaelin explained patiently for the 10th time. "They are powered by shadow and speed, but they lack the patience and the understanding of mortal construction. They build for eternity in darkness. Humans need warmth, flow, and temporary solutions. We need architects and engineers, not conquerors with hammers." The friction was a natural consequence of their disparate natures and the demands of their new rule. Kaelin had the practical knowledge of mortal survival. Lysandra had the absolute authority and magical means. They were constantly correcting each other, a force duality that was the only way forward. Their biggest challenge came from the external leader, Lady Elara. The general of the human resistance refused to allow the vampire, shadow builders deep inside her established communities. "We accept your protection against the raiders, Warbride," Elara stated during a tense holographic conference, her image shimmering with suspicion. "But we do not allow your people near our farms or our children. We will rebuild our own. You will provide the necessary metals and grain that your former empire looted." Lysandra's patience snapped. She slammed her fist onto the table, the sharp, dominating energy briefly overwhelming the bond. "I am offering my most effective legions, General. Your people starve while you cling to pathetic prejudice." Kaelin intercepted the escalation instantly. "Lysandra, stop. Elara, your terms are accepted. The Citadel will provide the steel, the stone, and the necessary seed grain. No shadow builders will cross the established border without your personal authorization. But we require one concession. You will designate a small, secure zone for one of our liaison officers to oversee the resource transfer and prevent theft." Elara's gaze traveled between the furious queen and the calm consort. She saw Kaelin's weary conviction and Lysandra's reluctant withdrawal. The bond was clearly working, tempering the shadow. "I agree to the liaison," Elara finally conceded, her voice cold. "But it will be Elder Soren or no one. I will only deal with a man who has not pledged his soul to the night." The request hit Kaelin with the force of a punch. Elder Soren, his former mentor, had explicitly withdrawn the Sunlit Order's support. He was deliberately being asked to leverage his deepest allegiance for political gain. Lysandra, seeing the distress in Kaelin's mind through the bond, spoke for him. "The request is noted, General Elara. We will attempt to secure his service. The rebuilding begins now." Later, Kaelin stood alone in his study, staring at a brittle, half-burned book of Paladin architectural designs. He missed the simplicity of the sword, the clarity of a direct enemy. The administrative war was far harder on his soul than the physical one. Lysandra entered, silent as always, and placed a single silver vial of shimmering liquid on his desk. It was a potent, distilled nutrient paste, a vampiric delicacy designed for maximum energy, albeit one lacking any mortal taste. "You look ill, Kaelin," she observed, her tone flat. "The workload is destroying you. You need sleep." "I am fine." "It is the exhaustion of being a human surrounded by creatures who do not tire," Kaelin replied, not looking at the vial. "And the pressure from Soren. He believes I am corrupted. He won't help us." Lysandra walked behind him and placed her cool, strong hands on his tense shoulders. The gesture was rare and non-political, a pure transference of stabilizing energy through the bond. "You are not corrupted," she said, her voice dropping to a low, comforting hum that strangely calmed the chaos in his mind. "You are grounded. Viridian offered eternity, you chose the chaos of mortal governance. Soren's peace was an unreachable ideal of light. Our peace, Kalen, is a compromise of shadows and dust. It is messy, difficult, and constant. But it is real. She leaned down, her lips brushing his ear. I felt your frustration today. The sheer weight of running this empire. I understand why my sire preferred constant war. It was easier than maintaining order. But we are not him. We rule together, Paladin. The weight is halved. Kalen closed his eyes, accepting the quiet, stabilizing energy she was giving him through their shared bond. Their relationship, built on a mountain of deception, was slowly, painfully, becoming an expression of mutual strength. They were no longer just the Warbride and the Paladin. They were the heirs of the dawn, bound together by the scars of peace, facing a future that required both their light and their shadow to survive the quiet war of logistics. He knew he had to meet with Soren. The fragile peace depended on securing the trust of the very person who believed Kalen was a betrayal of everything he once stood for. Kalen Thorne traveled alone to the meeting point, a shattered shrine of the Sunlit Order, barely recognizable amidst the scorched plains. He wore no armor, only simple dark robes provided by the Citadel, a conscious choice to appear neither as a paladin nor as a consort, but simply as Kalen. Elder Soren was waiting. His face, usually kind, was etched with a profound sorrow that cut Kalen deeper than any blade. Soren was the last vestige of Kalen's old life. A man who represented the purity and light Kalen was now forced to compromise. You look well, Kalen, Soren said, his voice quiet. For a man sleeping in the heart of the shadow and bound to the creature who killed your comrades. I am alive, Soren, Kalen replied, kneeling respectfully, a gesture of deference to his mentor, if not his old order. And the war is over. That is the only thing that matters. Is it? Soren challenged, stepping back. You have become a part of the darkness you swore to destroy. Tell me, Kalen, when you stood beside the Warbride, when you accepted her blood, did you feel the light of the Sunlit Order dim inside you? Kalen stood up, meeting his mentor's searching gaze. I felt the oath of blood bind my life to hers. I felt the necessity of that lie. And now, I feel the necessity of this truth. We did not destroy the shadow, Soren. We silenced its heart. Lysandra and I are tearing down the war machine, rebuilding the human territories, and offering a peace Viridian never would. And you expect me to believe the creature who led the genocide is now a queen of peace? And that you, the last paladin, are her champion? A dark jest, Kalen. Kalen knew he couldn't simply rely on political rhetoric. He had to appeal to the deeper truth, the truth of the true vow. When I stood against Valdis, he attempted to rip the bond from my soul, Kalen confessed, lowering his voice. He expected my light to fight his shadow. Instead, I channeled the void silence, the absolute neutral state of the blood heart, to extinguish his magic. That stability comes from the true vow, Soren. Lysandra's dark authority is tempered by my mortal practicality, and my idealism is contained by her ruthless command. It is a dual anchor. He reached out his hand, palm up. You asked for a liaison, Soren. I cannot ask Lysandra to risk any other vampire. I am the only one who can navigate both worlds. But I need you to lead the rebuilding efforts in the border territories. The humans will listen to you, not to my queen. I need you to be the light that proves our shadow is true. Soren looked at Kalen's hand, then at the obsidian ring on his finger, the symbol of his forbidden alliance. The weight of the request, the risk of associating the pure Sunlit Order with the Citadel of Dread, was immense. If I accept, Soren said, his voice heavy with warning, I do it for the people, not for your throne. And I need a guarantee. An absolute, tangible measure of your commitment to the light. Name it, Kalen responded instantly. The Bloodheart is the source of all the evil in this land. Its silence is a temporary mercy. To truly prove your commitment, you must allow me to place a sunlit seal of containment on the heart itself. It is a powerful, ancient ritual. It will not destroy the heart, but it will ensure that neither Lysandra nor any future Vex can ever drain its power for conquest again. It is a safeguard against the return of tyranny. The request hit Kalen like a physical blow. The Bloodheart was the source of their stability. Its inertia was the core of their political power. Allowing Soren to place a sunlit seal meant permanently limiting the Queen's magical authority and risking the delicate equilibrium created by the true vow. It was a massive, terrifying risk that could expose them to the remaining pure-blood factions who would see it as a vulnerability. Kalen felt a spike of alarm through the bond. Lysandra was sensing the high-stakes negotiation. No, Kalen. You cannot. It compromises the power of the vow. Kalen ignored the silent warning. He looked at Soren, seeing the old man's absolute conviction. He knew that for peace to be genuine, it had to be built on sacrifice, not just victory. The sunlit seal will be permitted, Kalen stated, his voice firm, overriding Lysandra's internal protest. But only you will perform the ritual. And you will work directly with Lysandra. You will see the truth of our rule, Soren, not just the darkness. Soren finally smiled, a faint, weary expression of hope. He grasped Kalen's hand, a silent acceptance of the terrifying burden. Then I will serve. And I will pray, my son, that the light you carry is enough to contain the shadow you married. Kalen returned to the citadel, the weight of his decision heavy on his mind. He found Lysandra waiting for him in their chambers, her wings slightly flared in agitation. You agreed to the sunlit seal, Lysandra accused, her voice cold and hard. You risked the entire stability of our reign, Kalen. That seal will act as a counter-magic. It risks breaking the void silence and exposing us to the remaining purebloods who are watching from the fringes. It risks everything for trust, Lysandra, Kalen countered, walking towards her. Without Soren we lose the border territories and the peace fractures. The seal is the price of peace. It proves that we intend to rule justly, not through tyranny. If our bond is as true as you claim, it will withstand the test of the seal. Lysandra stared at him, her red eyes burning with a deep conflict of fury and reluctant admiration. She was a creature of power and command, and the idea of voluntarily giving up an ounce of that power for the sake of abstract trust was anathema to her. Yet she was bound to the man who demanded it. She finally relented, the tension draining from her posture. Very well, Paladin. But I will be present for every moment of the ritual. And if that seal threatens our bond, I will personally tear it and Soren apart. We rule by the oath of blood, Kalen. Do not forget that I will protect our union even from your idealism. The agreement was made. Kalen had secured the light's uneasy truce, but at the cost of deepening the internal friction with his queen. The greatest trial of the heirs of the dawn was not external, but the constant, brutal negotiation between the two worlds now bound by a single vow. The ritual to place the sunlit seal of containment was a study in profound, opposing forces. Deep within the citadel, in the chamber of the inert blood heart, stood Elder Soren, clad in the white and gold remnants of his sunlit robes, radiating a pure, unwavering light. Facing him, on the other side of the crimson pool, stood Lysandra Vex, her obsidian armor and black wings stark against the shadow, her very posture daring the light to trespass. In the center, mediating the two forces, was Kalen Thorn. He was Soren's apprentice, bound to Lysandra, and now the anchor for both extremes. The air crackled with a silent, volatile tension, far more dangerous than any battle. The integrity of this chamber is guaranteed by the oath of blood, Soren, Lysandra stated, her voice a low, dangerous warning. If your magic threatens the void silence, I will intervene. Soren merely nodded, his focus absolute. He began the ancient chant of the sunlit order, his voice resonating with power as he drew upon the faint, distant light of the actual sun, filtered through the shattered citadel. In his hands, a small silver medallion, inscribed with the most sacred runes of the order, began to glow with a fierce, blinding white. As the light grew, Kalen felt the delicate balance of the void silence start to strain. The neutral field he maintained around the blood heart was stable because the two opposing powers were entirely absent. Soren's pure light was an intrusion, attempting to force the heart into a reaction. The moment Soren raised the glowing medallion and directed the seal's energy towards the inert crystal heart, the true danger was revealed. Kalen cried out, clutching his chest. The oath of blood transmitted a searing, tearing pain as the light of the seal attempted to purify the bond itself. Lysandra also gasped, her immense concentration momentarily broken. The bond, meant to contain and balance, was violently pulled, forcing the light in Kalen to repel the shadow in Lysandra and vice versa. The seal attacks the vow. Lysandra roared, her wings flaring wide, ready to unleash a defense. Stop, Soren. You compromise the bond. It is only testing the bond, Warbride. Soren shouted back, his voice straining under the immense magical effort. If your vow is built on true balance, it will hold. If it is built on deceit, it will break. Kalen knew Soren was right. The seal was the ultimate test. If their bond was merely a treacherous magical transaction, the purity of the light would shatter it. But if the true vow, the genuine commitment to their shared future, was the anchor, it would endure. Lysandra, trust the truth. Kalen yelled, fighting against the centrifugal force tearing at their connection. He fell to his knees, his body racked with spasm, but he focused every fiber of his being, every shard of the void silence he had mastered. He didn't fight the seal, he actively welcomed it. He pushed his own light, the power of the paladin, out through the bond and into Lysandra, forcing her to accept the light's presence. At the same time he pulled her deep, dark certainty, her primal Vex shadow, into his own core, forcing his mortal being to house the darkness. The counter-effect was instantaneous and agonizingly intimate. Lysandra's body arched, the rush of Kalen's pure, contained light a shock to her dark physiology. She felt his inherent goodness, his weariness, his resolve, all pouring into her soul. At the same time, Kaelin felt the chilling, immortal power of the shadow rush into him, bringing with it a deep, cold understanding of the Vex line's history and the burden of eternal life. They screamed, a single unified sound of pain and power. The crystal blood heart pulsed violently, but then, under the pressure of the combined light and shadow surging through the true vow, it stabilized again. Soren completed the chant, and the silver medallion soared to the heart. It adhered to the surface not with a blast, but with a final, definite click. A network of white gold runes spread across the black crystal, locking it in place. The sunlit seal of containment was complete. The tearing pain ceased. Kaelin lay on the floor, breathing heavily, feeling profoundly altered. He was weaker, yet stronger. Lysandra rushed to his side, her face pale, her red eyes wide with a combination of terror and awe. "It changed us," Lysandra breathed, her voice raw. "I felt your soul, Kaelin. The truth of your light. It is real. And the darkness in me accepted it. And I felt the absolute cold strength of the Vex line," Kaelin replied, slowly rising. "We are bound, Lysandra. The seal didn't break us, it merely refined the vow. Our power is now conditional, we can only channel the silence if both our wills are united in peace. If either of us attempts to use the heart for tyranny, the seal will instantly nullify the power." Soren, leaning on a wall, his face streaming with sweat, nodded weakly. "The vow held, my son. The peace is real. You have paid the highest price for the people's trust." The ritual was successful, but the consequence was that Kaelin and Lysandra were now permanently dependent on their mutual will. Any conflict between them would instantly render their joint rule powerless against outside forces. Their greatest challenge immediately materialized. As they exited the Bloodheart chamber, a panicked messenger drow ran up to Lysandra. "My queen. An emergency dispatch from the southern border. A new army has attacked the border territories. They bear the crest of the Black Iron Horde. General Ilara's forces are retreating. They demand the handover of the Citadel's command, or they will exterminate the remaining human populace." The quiet war was over. The peace they had purchased with their blood and their bond was threatened by a new external enemy. The sunlit seal ensured they could not resort to tyranny, but it also meant they had to face this new horde with limited, conditional power, relying entirely on the fragile trust they had just forged. They were rulers without an army, facing a foe whose brutality matched Viridian's at his worst. The Black Iron Horde was a ruthless mercenary kingdom from the eastern wastes, known for its sheer brutality and siege warfare. Their sudden, aggressive push into the border territories was a direct challenge to the fragile peace established by the heirs of the Dawn. Their goal was clear: exploit the power vacuum created by Viridian Vex's downfall and seize the Citadel's resources. Lysandra Vex and Kaelin Thorne immediately assembled their war council. It was a bizarre gathering in the Citadel's command room. The stoic vampire queen, the pragmatic paladin consort, the newly secured elder Soren, and Lady Ilara, holographically projected from the retreating human fortress. "They are using siege cannons and elemental shock troops," Ilara reported, her face grim. "My forces are too few and lack the heavy armor to withstand their advance. If they take the western pass, they will reach the agricultural heartland in 3 days. Their strategy is sound," Lysandra conceded, her immense knowledge of warfare instantly dissecting the threat. "They seek a quick, decisive victory to demoralize the region. We must deny them the pass. General Zarek's remaining legions are few, but they are disciplined. They will form the vanguard." "Wait," Kaelin intervened, his hand resting on the map. "Sending Zarek's vampires into a head-on battle with their artillery is a suicide mission. They will be decimated, and the Black Iron Horde will only grow stronger. We cannot afford that loss, political or military." "We cannot afford to lose the pass," Consort Thorne, Lysandra replied, a flash of her old ruthless general persona returning. "A quick victory is all that matters." Kaelin felt a flare of conflict through the oath of blood, not of malice, but of fundamental disagreement on military philosophy. The difference between the mortal's focus on preservation and the immortal's focus on swift dominance was stark. He instinctively reached for the void silence, but the sunlit seal immediately checked his power. The stability of the Bloodheart would only support actions taken in mutual consensus, not actions driven by internal conflict. Their powers were effectively nullified until they agreed. Lysandra felt the sudden dampening of her magical authority and realized Kaelin was deliberately challenging her command, relying on the seal's safeguard. Her eyes narrowed, but she recognized the necessity of consensus. "Explain your alternative, Paladin," she commanded, her voice tight. "We use a combined ambush," Kaelin explained, tracing a route through the treacherous northern canyons. "Zarek's legions do not fight a frontal battle. They lead the horde into the canyons. General Ilara's forces, who know the terrain, will launch a surprise attack from the high ground, collapsing the canyon exits. They will be trapped, not destroyed. A beautiful maneuver, Lysandra admitted, a genuine spark of respect in her eyes. But it requires absolute trust between the human and the vampire forces. Something that does not exist. Then we forge it, Soren interjected, his gaze firm. I will go to the pass with Zarek's legion. My presence, and my guarantee of the Sunlit Seal's authority, will ensure Ilara's forces cooperate. She trusts me. It was a massive risk, putting the last pureblood paladin at the head of a vampire army, mediating a human ambush. But it was their only chance. Agreed, Lysandra said, bowing her head slightly to Kaelin and Soren. The need for survival had forced the queen to accept the counsel of both her human consort and the paladin elder. That evening, as Zarek's forces prepared to march, Kaelin found Lysandra overseeing the final preparations. Her movements were sharp and efficient, but he sensed a deep-seated anxiety through the bond. You are worried for Soren, Kaelin stated, walking up to her. I am worried for the stability of this reign, Lysandra corrected, not looking at him. If Soren fails, Ilara will not forgive us and Zarek's remnants will scatter. We will lose the pass and the horde will consume us. We have placed the entire future of the Dawn on the fragile hope of trust. Something I have spent centuries learning to despise. I am going with them, Kaelin announced. Lysandra spun around, her face a mask of furious opposition. Absolutely not. You are the anchor of the vow. If you fall, the seal and the Bloodheart become unstable. The entire citadel is at risk. And if I stay here and the ambush fails due to lack of trust, the entire world is at risk, Kaelin argued. Soren needs a direct line to our shared authority, a presence that can bridge the absolute gap between the shadow and the light. I must go, Lysandra. Our bond will not be broken by distance. It will be broken by failure. He walked towards her, placing his hands on her armored shoulders. We are the heirs of the Dawn. The peace we forged must be defended together. I will be the light that guides the shadow, and I need you to be the queen that commands the citadel in my absence. Trust the vow, Lysandra. It held against Viridian and it held against Valthus. It will hold against the horde. Lysandra searched his eyes, the deep crimson meeting the resolute blue. She felt his conviction, his fear, and his unwavering belief in their shared path. She knew she could not stop him without shattering the fragile trust they had built. Go, she finally whispered, her voice laced with immense reluctance. She lifted her hand to his face, her touch cool against his skin. But know this, Paladin. If you fall, I will not simply mourn. I will summon the last, darkest power of the Vex line, Sunlit Seal be damned, and I will personally rip the Black Iron Horde from the face of the world. Kaelin simply nodded, knowing her threat was both a terrifying promise and the highest possible expression of her love and commitment. He was leaving his queen, the source of his stability, to lead an army of vampires and humans into a canyon ambush, secured only by the belief in his forbidden marriage. He was going to war not as a paladin but as the consort, bound by the oath of blood. The northern canyons were a desolate, razor-edged wound in the earth, and they were about to become the graveyard of the Black Iron Horde. Kaelin Thorne rode at the head of General Zarek's surprisingly disciplined legion, the vampire general's presence a constant, brooding tension at Kaelin's flank. Elder Soren, clad in simple leather armor over his robes, rode beside the paladin consort, his face set in grim resolve. The Horde's vanguard is predictable, Kaelin stated, his voice tight over the roar of the canyon winds. He was speaking into a magically amplified conduit linked to Lady Ilara's hidden forces on the high cliffs. They rely on momentum. Zarek, you will engage in retreat, leading them precisely to the northern choke point. If they sense an ambush, this entire plan collapses. I am a general of the Shadow Empire, Thorn, Zarek sneered, though the tone was subdued by the magical constraint Lysandra had placed on him. I do not lead retreats. I lead victories. Today, retreat is the victory, General, Soren interjected, his voice carrying the authority of his centuries. Trust the consort strategy, Zarek. The Warbride commanded it and the Sunlit Seal sanctions it. The mention of the seal was enough. Zarek grit his teeth and directed his legion into the main pass. Kaelin dismounted at a high vantage point overlooking the narrowest section, the choke point. He felt the cold presence of Lysandra through the oath of blood, not as a distraction, but as a vast, steady power source holding the citadel together. She was miles away, but her confidence was the rock beneath his command. The engagement began swiftly. Zarek's legion, utilizing their speed and shadow-blending techniques, struck the Horde vanguard, delivered a precise, damaging blow and immediately pulled back, drawing the larger, heavier Horde deeper into the narrow canyon mouth. The Horde's general, a massive, scarred warrior named Kar, swallowed the bait instantly, believing the vampire forces were terrified and broken. He ordered his main columns and heavy siege weaponry to flood the pass. Kaelin watched, his heart hammering against his ribs, calculating the distance. He had to wait until Car's core column was fully within the kill zone, past the point of no return. Now Alara. Kalen finally roared into the conduit, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. From the high cliffs, Lady Alara's hidden human forces unleashed their payload. Not arrows but huge, strategically placed charges of explosive dust and stone. A thunderous roar shook the earth. Both entrances to the choke point collapsed in a massive cloud of rock and dust, sealing Car's main force inside. The victory was fleeting. Carr, realizing the ambush, immediately ordered his elemental shock troops to begin clearing the rubble. Zarek's remaining forces were pinned at the far end, facing the concentrated, furious might of the trapped horde. The plan has failed, consort. Zarek shouted over the roar of the battle. They will clear the rubble before Alara can reinforce. They must be held. We will charge. No. You hold your line, General. Kalen commanded, drawing his sword. He turned to Soren. I need you to anchor the void silence here. If their general uses any dark magic, you must nullify it. I'm going in. Kalen, you cannot. You are mortal. Soren protested, but Kalen was already sprinting down the dusty slope. Kalen plunged into the chaos. He didn't seek out Carr. He ran straight toward the section of the cliff that Alara's forces were struggling to collapse completely. The horde's elemental troops were focused on clearing the pass, their backs turned to him. Drawing on the oath of blood, Kalen channeled the sheer, terrifying speed and instinct he had gained from Lysandra. He moved like a dark blur, slicing through the elemental troops' ranks with precision, his borrowed shadow shield deflecting their confused attacks. He reached the compromised cliff face. This time he didn't need a sword. He focused his will, drawing on the immense, channeled energy flowing through the true vow. He focused the raw, explosive power of pure light, the very energy Lysandra had taught him to contain, and slammed it into the weak structural point of the cliff. The light was blinding, a flash of pure paladin power concentrated by the shadow's discipline. The entire section of the cliff face groaned, then violently collapsed in a crushing avalanche of rock and steel, sealing the horde entirely within the choke point. Carr, the general of the horde, turned just in time to see the human consort, the symbol of the Dawn's fragile unity, standing over the wreckage. Carr roared, charging Kalen with a massive warhammer. Kalen, exhausted and depleted, knew he couldn't win the physical fight. He looked into Carr's enraged eyes and focused the one power no other warrior in the world could withstand, the void silence. He unleashed a focused blast of anti-magic straight into Carr's enchanted armor. The effect was devastating. Carr's armor instantly lost its magic, his strength evaporated, and his enchanted hammer felt suddenly like raw stone. The horde general collapsed, physically overwhelmed by the sudden neutralization of all his sustaining dark energy. Kalen stood over the defeated general, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had won not by light nor by shadow but by the complex, devastating power of the true vow. When Alara's forces finally made it down and Kalen presented Carr as a prisoner, the impact on the human general was immense. You risked your life for the ambush, Alara stated, her voice quiet with reluctant respect. And you fought alongside the vampires, Kalen. This peace, it is not the peace we expected. It is the only peace we have, Alara, Kalen replied, exhaustion finally overtaking him. The horde is broken. The border territories are safe. Now we rebuild. The victory secured their reign, but the cost was high. Kalen returned to the citadel utterly spent, his energy reserves near zero. He stumbled into their private chambers, barely able to stand. Lysandra was waiting. She rushed to him, her usual composure utterly shattered. She didn't speak, she simply wrapped her powerful wings around him, creating a cocoon of dark velvet and protection. She had felt his reckless, terrifying expenditure of energy through the bond, the near-fatal cost of wielding both the light and the shadow. Never again, Kalen, she whispered into his hair, her voice trembling. Do you understand the risk you took? You could have broken the bond forever. But I didn't, Kalen murmured, leaning into her immense strength. The bond, it held. Because we both wanted the same thing. Lysandra held him tighter, her immense power now flowing through the bond not to dominate, but to heal, to stabilize, and to love. The lie of their marriage was over. It was the deepest truth in their broken world. They had saved the new empire, and in the process they had finally, truly saved each other. The victory in the canyon ambush was not just military, it was a political earthquake. It proved that the heirs of the Dawn, led by a vampire queen and a human paladin, could not only defend their territory but could do so by forging an unthinkable unity between the shadow and the light. The Black Iron Horde was shattered, its general, Carr, a prisoner in the Citadel's deepest dungeon. The War Council reconvened, no longer with tension, but with reluctant respect. Lysandra Vex sat on her temporary throne, her imposing presence now softened by a quiet dignity. Kalen Thorne stood beside her, his weariness visible, but his authority absolute. Their first act was dealing with General Zarek. General Zarek, Lysandra commanded, her voice even. Your performance in the canyon was exemplary. You followed the consort's orders and delivered a military success against your ingrained desire for conquest. You have proven that loyalty to this reign is possible. Zarek, standing ramrod straight, waited for the expected reward of a higher command. Therefore, Kalen continued, stepping forward, his voice firm, you are being sent to the eastern wastes. You will lead the dismantled remnants of the Black Iron Horde into reconstruction efforts. You will build roads, secure water sources, and establish trade routes. Your task is to turn a place of conflict into a place of commerce. If you succeed, your honor will be restored. If you fail, the Sunlit Seal will ensure that your punishment is permanent. Zarek's eyes burned with silent outrage. It was a sentence of enforced, tedious peace, a vampire's worst nightmare. But he recognized the finality of the command and the impossibility of defiance. He bowed deeply, a true gesture of submission this time. Your will, Consort Thorne. With the internal militaristic threat neutralized and the external threat destroyed, they turned to their fragile ally, Lady Alara. General Alara, Lysandra addressed the shimmering projection. Your forces performed with excellence. The border territories are secure. The terms of the peace are now open for revision. We offer full, unconditional autonomy and a mutual defense pact. You will not pay tribute, you will simply be our sovereign ally. Alara stared at the Queen, then at Kalen, the offer so generous it was stunning. And what does the Shadow Empire demand in return, Warbride? Only one thing, Kalen answered, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. That you send Elder Soren home. His task is complete. He needs rest and the people need their guide. Alara finally nodded, a flicker of genuine respect crossing her face. The Paladin consort keeps his word. The autonomy is accepted. The border territories are allies of the heirs of the dawn. The council dissolved, leaving Lysandra and Kalen alone in the chamber. The victory was complete, the reign consolidated. But the deepest truth of their union remained. Lysandra walked over to the massive window looking out over the citadel. She had won the war, secured her freedom, and established a stable reign. Yet, she felt a quiet, persistent emptiness, the void that had always defined the ancient Vex line. Kalen walked up behind her, placing his hands gently on her immense, dark wings, which were now fully healed. He was no longer afraid of the darkness, he simply understood it. Why are you quiet, Lysandra? Kalen asked, his voice soft. We have won. The realm is ours. It is too quiet, Kalen, she admitted, her voice low and vulnerable. My whole life was defined by the scream of battle and the absolute dominion of my sire. Now there is only stability. And I have no frame of reference for this kind of peace. I don't know who I am when I am not the Warbride. Kalen turned her gently to face him. He didn't see the feared general. He saw the immensely powerful, immensely lonely woman bound to his soul by the most profound of vows. You are the queen of authority, Lysandra, Kalen murmured, reaching up to touch the soft, pale skin of her cheek. You are the one who chooses peace over power. You are the one who accepted the light into your darkness. You are the only thing holding this fractured world together. And you, Paladin, she challenged softly, her red eyes searching his. You were ordered to destroy me. You married me with a lie. Now what? The lie is over. What is the truth of the Paladin consort? The truth is the oath of blood, Kalen confessed, finally allowing his own buried emotions to surface. It started as a political necessity, a chain of survival. But the bond did not break my allegiance to the light. It showed me where the light truly needed to be. I don't love the Shadow Empire, Lysandra. But I love the woman who risks her eternity for a difficult, messy peace. Lysandra leaned into his touch, her immense presence folding around him. The emotional honesty, the true surrender of the Paladin to the Warbride, was the final fulfillment of their vow. The political marriage was now an unconditional commitment. Then the true reign is not about thrones or titles, Consort Thorne, Lysandra decided, a final, beautiful gravity in her voice. It is about the two of us. The sun and the shadow, forging a single, terrifying future together. She leaned in and finally truly kissed him. It was not a kiss of passion, but a kiss of absolute union, cold strength meeting warm resolve, a silent acknowledgement that the lie which began their journey was now the sacred truth of their unbreakable bond. Years passed under the rule of the heirs of the dawn. The citadel of dread was slowly transformed. The obsidian walls remained, but they were no longer monuments to fear. They housed libraries, universities of cross-cultural study, and the new seat of the Alliance. General Zarek, to his own bitter astonishment, succeeded in his task, establishing a stable trade network in the eastern wastes. The border territories flourished under Lady Alara's pragmatic leadership, secured by the Mutual Defense Pact. Elder Soren returned to the Sunlit Shrine, a trusted advisor to the ruling couple, a living bridge between the two realms. The Blood Heart remained silent, secured by the Sunlit Seal and anchored by the True Vow. Lysandra and Kaelin, the Queen of Authority and the Consort of Silence, became a legend in their own time. They ruled not by tyranny, but by the complex, often challenging necessity of their bond. Any disagreement, any divergence in their moral or political compass, instantly dampened their joint magical power, forcing them back into consensus. Their reign was a constant, difficult negotiation, the ultimate expression of power rooted in compromise. They stood, one evening, on the ramparts of the citadel, watching the twilight. The twin moons were rising, but they were no longer blood-red. They glowed with a soft, ethereal silver, signifying the new era of stability. The lie of the marriage is well and truly forgotten, Kaelin, Lysandra observed, her hand laced through his. She was no longer wearing heavy armor, but simple, elegant robes, her wings folded peacefully. They believed the oath of blood was an ancient rite of love, not a tool of treason. Perhaps it always was, Lysandra, Kaelin replied, turning to face her. The obsidian ring on his finger had worn smooth, a part of his own flesh now. The lie of our start was simply a difficult path to our truth. We were ordered to be enemies, but we were bound to be partners. And if the Shadow Empire rises again? Lysandra challenged, a familiar, ancient spark in her eyes. If tyranny returns? Kaelin smiled, leaning in to kiss the brow of the woman who was his anchor, his queen, and his heart. Then we will defeat it. Because the paladin who was ordered to kill you, Warbride, instead married you. And the two of us are the only force strong enough to hold the dawn. Their shared life, built on the biggest lie in history, was now the most profound truth in the world. The heirs of the dawn reigned not forever, but for as long as their forbidden, unbreakable vow endured.